the laughter lasted only a second. One careless joke, spoken by an exhausted single father trying to hide another impossible day behind a smile, collided with the quiet dignity of a woman sitting alone in a sunny rooftop lounge. He glanced toward her white mobility cane resting against the chair and, with awkward humor meant only to lighten the silence, casually remarked that she looked like she was waiting for him and must be his blind date. Instead of looking offended, the woman slowly turned toward his voice, smiled with remarkable calm, and answered that she had actually been waiting for someone exactly like him. At that moment, every sound around them seemed to disappear. He had no idea that the stranger before him was one of the country's most respected technology CEOs, nor that this unexpected encounter would completely rewrite the future of his family. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change lives, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing heartfelt stories together. Graham Whitmore had never imagined that life could become so exhausting before he reached 40. Every morning began before sunrise, not because he enjoyed early mornings, but because his 8-year-old daughter, Elodie, needed extra time to prepare for school after years of physical therapy following an illness that had nearly taken her life as a toddler. Although she had recovered remarkably, she still walked with caution and tired more easily than other children. Graham never complained. He packed lunches, braided her hair despite never mastering the technique, cleaned their small apartment, and worked 2 jobs whenever possible. Since losing his wife, Mary Ann, to an unexpected heart condition 5 years earlier, he had become both parents, learning every lesson through mistakes, sleepless nights, and quiet determination. That afternoon, after completing a long delivery shift, Graham stopped at a rooftop café and daytime lounge overlooking the city harbor. The place served fresh lunches, coffee, and sparkling drinks beneath bright white umbrellas swaying gently in the summer breeze. It was one of the few places where he allowed himself 30 peaceful minutes before collecting Elodie from school. His clothes carried signs of a difficult week, and his shoulders sagged beneath invisible burdens that no one else could see. Near the corner sat a woman dressed with understated elegance. Dark sunglasses covered her eyes despite the shaded table. A folded white cane leaned carefully beside her chair. She appeared completely composed, sipping iced tea while listening to birds singing somewhere beyond the terrace. Several nearby guests whispered quietly, though Graham paid them little attention. Feeling unusually lighthearted after receiving news that Elodie's latest medical examination showed continued improvement, Graham smiled toward the stranger and made the playful remark that she looked like she might be his blind date. Her answer arrived gently. She explained that perhaps fate possessed a strange sense of humor because she had agreed to meet someone introduced through a charity foundation that supported single parents. The volunteer arranging the meeting had described a father who never accepted pity and always smiled even when life offered every reason not to. Graham blinked in confusion before apologizing immediately for his thoughtless comment. Instead of growing uncomfortable, the woman laughed softly. She introduced herself as Lenora Ashcroft. The name meant nothing to Graham. She seemed relieved. For once, she said, someone had spoken to her without recognizing the headlines, the interviews, or the billions attached to her company. Only after another customer excitedly approached to congratulate Lenora on a recent business award did Graham realize who she really was. Ashcroft Dynamics had transformed accessibility technology around the world. Lenora herself had gradually lost her eyesight because of a rare inherited retinal disease during her 20s. Refusing to surrender her ambitions, she redirected her engineering career toward creating adaptive technology for people with disabilities. Within 15 years she had built one of the fastest-growing companies in North America, employing thousands while funding research, scholarships, and rehabilitation centers. Graham felt embarrassed beyond words. He apologized again. Lenora surprised him by thanking him. She admitted that almost everyone treated her with excessive caution. They measured every sentence, avoided jokes, or stared awkwardly at her cane. Graham's mistaken joke had been clumsy, but it had come without calculation or fear. It reminded her what ordinary conversation sounded like. They shared lunch beneath brilliant afternoon sunlight. For the first time in years, Graham found himself speaking honestly about life. He described Marianne's passing, the loneliness of raising Elodie alone, and the constant balancing act between paying bills and protecting childhood happiness. He never exaggerated his struggles, never asked for sympathy, and never hinted that Lenora could somehow solve his problems. Lenora listened more than she spoke. She explained that losing sight had not been the hardest challenge. The hardest part had been watching people assume blindness had stolen her intelligence, independence, or dreams. Investors doubted her. Competitors dismissed her. Even relatives quietly suggested retirement before she had turned 30. Their conversation ended only because Graham needed to collect Elodie. Before leaving, Lenora asked whether they might meet again. Not for business. Simply for coffee. The following weeks brought several daytime meetings across parks, botanical gardens, museums with audio exhibits, and quiet cafes filled with sunlight. Elodie quickly adored Lenora, whose remarkable memory allowed her to recognize voices after hearing them only once. She remembered tiny details everyone else forgot. She could identify birds by their songs, distinguish flowers through fragrance alone, and somehow knew exactly when Elodie needed encouragement without being told. Lenora never tried replacing Marianne in the little girl's heart. Instead, she became someone entirely different, a trusted friend whose confidence quietly inspired everyone around her. As Graham learned more about Lenora's company, he became increasingly impressed not by its wealth but by its values. Employees described a workplace where accessibility came before luxury, where leadership listened before speaking, and where profits regularly funded community projects. Still, success attracted enemies. One afternoon during an open charity exhibition, several investors publicly criticized Lenora's leadership. They insisted the company required someone without physical limitations to guide future expansion. Although they disguised their words behind polished business language, the prejudice remained obvious. News cameras captured everything. Lenora stood calmly through the criticism. Graham watched from nearby, anger rising inside him. When reporters surrounded the investors afterward, Graham quietly approached Lenora and simply asked whether she wanted to leave. She smiled. She said running away had never improved anyone's vision. Instead, she walked onto the presentation stage and delivered one of the most remarkable speeches Graham had ever heard. She never attacked her critics. She thanked every obstacle that had forced her to think differently. She explained that disability had never reduced her ability to imagine possibilities. If anything, it had expanded her understanding of human resilience. The audience rose in applause. The investors looked suddenly very small. Yet Lenora admitted privately afterward that courage often looked stronger from the outside than it felt within. For the first time, Graham saw tears behind the sunglasses. Not because of the criticism itself. Because she was simply tired of proving her worth again and again. Without thinking, Graham took her hand. He reminded her that Elodie believed superheroes existed because of people exactly like her. That simple sentence broke through every wall she had built around herself. Months passed. Their friendship deepened into something neither expected. Neither rushed the relationship. Both carried scars. Both understood loss. Both knew love demanded patience rather than dramatic promises. Meanwhile, Elodie flourished. Inspired by Lenora, she volunteered at local community centers, reading audiobooks and helping children with different disabilities discover adaptive games and technology. She stopped viewing her own physical limitations as something embarrassing. Instead, she learned they represented only one small chapter of her story. Unexpectedly, Graham received devastating news. The apartment building where he rented was sold to developers. Every tenant had 90 days to relocate. Housing prices had climbed beyond anything Graham could afford. Rather than panic publicly, he quietly searched every evening while pretending everything remained normal for Elodie. Lenora eventually sensed something was wrong. She recognized the hesitation in his voice. After much persuasion, Graham finally admitted the truth. He expected sympathy. Instead, Lenora offered opportunity. Her foundation had recently completed affordable housing specifically for families caring for children with medical or accessibility needs. The apartments were beautiful, bright, and designed for independence rather than charity. Graham hesitated. His pride resisted. Lenora gently reminded him that accepting help never diminished dignity when that help existed precisely for families like his. He accepted. Moving day became one of the happiest afternoons Elodie could remember. Sunlight streamed through wide windows. Accessible playgrounds filled the neighborhood. Children laughed freely. For the first time since Marianne's passing, their new apartment felt less like survival and more like home. Not everyone celebrated. A sensational journalist published an article accusing Lenora of favoring Graham because of their personal relationship. Social media exploded with speculation. Competitors demanded investigations. The foundation's board initiated an independent review. Weeks later, every document confirmed the housing decision followed exactly the same transparent qualification process applied to hundreds of families. Graham had earned his place long before anyone knew Lenora personally. The accusations collapsed. Public opinion shifted dramatically. People admired the couple's integrity even more than before. One bright autumn afternoon, during a community celebration honoring volunteers, Graham stood before neighbors, employees, children, and families whose lives had improved through Lenora's work. Instead of giving a formal speech, he spoke from the heart. He admitted that months earlier he had judged someone within seconds based on what he could see. He believed he was making an innocent joke. In reality, he had underestimated extraordinary strength hidden behind quiet confidence. Lenora followed with her own reflection. She confessed she had almost cancelled that meeting because another exhausting business week had convinced her that genuine human connection no longer existed. Instead, one awkward comment had introduced her to a father whose kindness outweighed every mistake. Their greatest lesson, she said, was not that perfect people eventually found each other. It was that imperfect people chose to keep seeing the best in one another after first impressions faded. As the afternoon celebration ended beneath warm golden sunlight, Graham knelt beside Elodie while Lenora stood smiling nearby. They were no longer three people connected by coincidence. They had become a family built on patience, honesty, forgiveness, and quiet courage. Graham finally understood that the most important things in life had never depended on perfect eyesight. They depended on seeing another person's heart before judging their circumstances. Lenora had spent years proving that blindness could never limit vision, while Graham discovered that grief did not have to define the rest of his life. Together they created a future filled not with impossible promises but with ordinary days made extraordinary through love, compassion, and unwavering hope. Before we finish, we'd love to hear from you. What lesson stayed with you the most from Graham and Lenora's journey? Have you ever discovered that your first impression of someone was completely wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments because your story might encourage someone else today. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember that the strongest people are often carrying invisible battles, and the greatest acts of kindness sometimes begin with a simple conversation, a sincere apology, and the willingness to truly see another person's heart.